Democracy is and will always be the best form of way to choose our leaders. Socrates might have had doubts about democracy and claimed that voting is a skill acquired and not a right, and that there can be many uneducated people making the wrong decisions. And to that I say, whose fault is the lack of education of the people? Yes, obviously a demagogue could be elected and ruin the country, but I and many still trust in the people. The internet became publicly available in 1993 when the World Wide Web was released into the public domain. This change and this technology can now connect people and allow people to express themselves from any location. Using the internet, we can build a more cost-effective voting system where the people have more power and control than they do now. People with disabilities or busy people who can't get a break day from their job will be able to vote. Of course, in-person paper votes will be allowed, so the public have different ways to vote, whichever they choose. But there are people who are afraid of this change, and there are some good reasons as to why. The biggest argument against online voting is hacking. And they are right. It is quite a big reason. Estonia is the only country in the world that currently uses online voting for elections. See video about Estonia and their online voting system. Unlike Estonia, a country like America holds huge power internationally, which means the other powerhouse countries like Russia and China would like to hack their system and influence their vote. How to beat this problem? The solution may be very simple, but to some may sound very ridiculous and dangerous. This is to have open ballot voting. Just reveal everyone's votes and everyone can see who voted for who. This way, there is no chance of rigging the votes through hacking. All the votes are aligned with the citizen registry, so there can't be bot votes. Seems like a crazy idea, but please ask yourself, is anonymous voting really better than open ballot voting? Take a game of Among Us, for example. The game allows the host to change the voting system from anonymous to open ballot voting and vice versa. Which voting system do you think is more advantageous to the crewmates? I and many firmly believe that anonymous voting is the more dangerous one. This is coded in a video game, so there is no way to rig the vote. But in anonymous voting, the idea of rigging the vote is present in real-life elections. Even in paper voting, though, far difficult to do. But even in this game, where rigging is impossible, anonymous voting is very advantageous for the imposter. Nobody can be held responsible for their vote. Nobody knows who's voting for whom, so the public doesn't have knowledge to deduce who's being shady or scummy, or understand one another's logic on their voting, or create some sort of statistic out of it. It makes it very easy for the imposter to protect their imposter friends in the vote, bandwagon on the vote to throw out an innocent crewmate without ever being observed and punished for their decision. This isn't just a game. It's a live demonstration that shows anonymous voting is worse than open ballot voting. And this is an important issue because this cyber democracy that I have in mind is more progressive, so much more than even Estonia's government. This is a method to improve representative democracy so much and turn every single citizen of a country to a mini politician and give them the power that they desperately deserve. You will not only vote for the president with this system, but also vote for every congressman and even Supreme Court judges and juries to elect them, and then even have the ability to show likes and dislikes on certain laws and suggest laws to the president, congressmen for voting as well. But most importantly, with this new system, there won't be any election years or months. The system will be available at all times, meaning that we won't have election days. Every day will be a voting day. A president can be chosen and they may work for 1 week or 1 month, and they may leave the office because the online votes changed and now a new president is elected. To give such power to an anonymous person will be very unreliable. With great power comes great responsibility. It's not exactly true. To be given great power, you need to be responsible. Having the history of people's votes and their changes in votes is also extremely educational, as it will show people's vote changing depending on new information, makes it far easier to create data on what type of ethnic, religious, or financial groups are voting in a certain way, so that everyone in the public will be well educated on it. It will bring so much light to the economics and politics when everyone will be able to see and learn who is responsible for whom to get elected and how their vote is affecting the world. The main arguments against this system of open ballot voting is the possibility of the voter being bribed, threatened, and the possibility of fights and conflicts breaking out because someone knows your vote and is harassing you for it. To that I say bribery and threats are not a problem created by open ballot voting. The issue is of time. This voting system's always voting policy fixes the issue of threats and bribery. In this system, if you are bribed, then you can vote a certain way in front of the briber's eyes and just change your vote later. Same thing with threats. Just follow the person's will and vote in a certain way. After escaping from the threat, simply change your vote. The other issue is of conflict deriving from different views and your boss or coworker harassing you for voting in a certain way. But really, this is not a great argument against open ballot voting. Anytime you express your own political view to your friends, families, coworkers, and bosses, there will be some disagreements and arguments. In fact, it's kind of ridiculous to put so much effort into keeping the votes secret when talking about your political beliefs in detail with anyone will most likely reveal who you are going to vote for. If your boss or coworkers or fellow students are making fun of you for voting for a certain someone, then that simply means they're uneducated and foolish. This can only be fixed through experience in education and a deeper understanding. Even then, having friendly discussions about your political beliefs with your friends may still end up being the actual outcome. The other argument against internet voting is types of hacking that focus on overflooding the servers with traffic and making the server crash. These types of sabotage are effective when the clock is ticking and the time limit for the final vote is impending. But in this always voting policy system, there won't be any strict rules like 4-year term. The ballot will be available and open at all times. You can simply wait until the servers are fixed and then vote. One argument people may have is that this type of system creates too much instability, that leaders and presidents changing too often could be problematic. I disagree. Having strict and rigid rules that can be changed, like a president having to serve 4 years or 2-term limit, are extremely arbitrary rules that are not flexible for the situation and undemocratic. It could very easily open avenues where a candidate can lie and cheat their way into presidency and later not only not withhold promises that they made, but further try to gain power, such as increasing the length of their term or gathering militaristic power to suppress the citizens, and the public will have no way to change their votes, even if they are informed of the situation. There could also be instances where a president has been performing very greatly and helping the country flourish, and people may want for the president to serve longer than 4 years. And while it is true that a situation where two candidates are so uneven in votes that one day one president is elected and the other day another president gets elected because the votes changed might happen, I still argue that this is true democracy. If anything, a candidate becoming president permanently for 4 years, despite the votes they received being shaky, barely above the other candidates, and a few more days of voting will have caused them to not have the majority vote, is extremely undemocratic. It is much fairer for the presidents to keep holding the majority vote throughout their term rather than just win one election and you have unrestricted power. Things such as instability can happen, but it's up to the people and their conscious choices to mend this. Worst case scenario, there could even be an agreement that both candidates should serve the role. But in a democracy, people exchanging arguments and information with one another could easily resolve the issue of instability in a heartbeat. Having rigid old rules like the American Constitution could be very detrimental to our democracy, as the practice of the law could turn out to be very flawed in real life, and the old rigid laws could be difficult to update and amend when new progressive ideas are introduced. Check out this video to understand the flaws of the American Constitution. The other thing that definitely should be decided is what type of voting system we shall use: ranking, elimination, plurality. This video talks about the many different forms of voting, but none can beat this video. Same with CGP Grey. I prefer a system where you can vote for each candidate once, but never twice. Also known as the approval voting. You just choose the number of people that you approve of. It is very simple, and in an online form this will function very similar to the role selection on a Discord server. Let's say there are 5 candidates named A, B, C, D, E. B and C both have very similar opinions. The votes are in, and it looks like A and B are winning while C, D, E are behind. In a plurality voting system, seeing this, you may only vote for B, but have no way to express your support for C, even if C is actually your preferred choice. But in an approval voting, you can vote for both C and B. In combined with our live voting system where you'll be able to change your vote at any time, you can change your vote again to see if C and B suddenly became the ones who start winning the election, or if D and E have way more votes compared to everyone else. You can keep your approval of C and B intact while voting for D or E and participate in that choice. This can work with any number of candidates. Scoring systems are flawed in that a person can give 10 to one candidate and 0 to another, while another voter only gave 1 point of differences to candidates. Ranking systems are also flawed in that they are too complicated, and if there are, say, 10 candidates, ranking them all accurately may be too much of a hassle. The most important aspect of democracy that is fully functional is the access to new and old important information and knowledge for all the people. There shall be records of who owns what, how much they own, how much taxes they pay, and any educational work, whether it be political, economic, or artistic, should be available to the public through the internet and libraries. Which is to say that patents and intellectual property laws should be completely abolished. This way, people can be educated on a variety of different professions and sectors without having to pay expensive fees to expensive schools, and be educated and gain a deeper understanding of life through artistic works, which may even affect decision making. This will not only greatly improve our performance, as education will be freer than before, allowing even the poorest of people to learn and acquire useful knowledge and experiences that they then can use to find better jobs, thus improving the society. This is also very important for the voters to make the right decision, as understanding of life, economy, and politics can lead to people knowing which candidate is talking about more realistic things and which one is corrupted, less knowledgeable, or promising unreasonable things. There should be no state secret. The only information that may be hidden from the public may be technical plannings and military spending during wartime. And even those can be exposed to the public if the public creates an article using the system I mentioned and vote to reveal this information and the elected official agrees to it. Some people, the anarchists, the communists, might be thinking, if we have an online system to vote for everything, why need a government? Why can't we just use the online system to do everything? Well, there are problems. The biggest issue is that direct democracy is slow. You have to wait for a certain amount of time for all the votes to gather, so without an elected judge or congressman or any representative, the decisions made regarding many subject matter will be just slow. However, the public should instead focus on the constitution of their country. The very first thing we should do is create a tab where any person can freely write and create their version of the constitution. People will vote on it as if they're voting for candidates using approval voting, and the constitution with the most approval will become the new constitution. In that constitution, how the government is formed, what representative positions are there, and how their powers function and spread out will be detailed. Then the next thing is to start the elections. The very important aspect to remember is that you should allow anyone to become a candidate for the respective government position they desire, whether it be the president, congressman, or member of the federal judiciary, the Supreme Court. While it may be controversial, I think that this system should allow underage people to vote or become candidates, while also allowing people in prison to vote and become candidates. The reason being that the US's current privatized and public prisons totally incarcerated 1.8 million people. Not allowing prisoners to vote may cause the corrupt government and billionaires to put people in jail, connecting them to petty crimes, and force them to work and have slave laborers, or take out their political opponents by framing them. As for underage voting, it may encourage children to learn about the political system that's sovereign over the country from a young age. But it also has the benefit of families who are poor but raise a lot of children to have more political power. It is also possible for the oligarch to adopt children solely for their voting power, but I think giving some powers to orphans may be a good idea, and even in this case they are still bargaining their voting power for better living conditions, and may not allow others to choose for them when they are more mature. I think that not allowing immigrants to nominate themselves is actually very racist. Some people may choose not to vote for that person because of their race, but allowing them a fair chance to compete is important and is humane. You can't judge a person by their race. The candidate could be very progressive and a smart person who can lead the country to a better place even if they were not born in that country. If you are that country's citizen, you should be allowed to nominate yourself. The ability for anyone to nominate themselves and campaign on the platform will save us from controlled democracy, aka the two-party system that may have become corrupted due to oligarch financing of both parties and lack of alternative choices. But more than that, the two-party system is created by the effects of plural voting, aka first past the post, and America is one of the largest countries that has become a victim of this flawed voting system. There is no need to create primaries and caucuses in the system. Everyone keeps so much attention to the final vote to determine the president, but primaries and caucuses could be done in a very undemocratic way, and there may even be local elections that are rigged. It's not true democracy if the people who are nominated in the first place are undemocratically elected. If that is not the case, someone who could perform well on a country scale could lose early because of a primary done in a certain state because the votes there are limited, have certain biases, and don't represent the country's whole opinion. Having so many small elections just makes it so that people lose because of a bad matchup in a bad place. We need everyone's opinions and thoughts on the election. Instead of having many small elections, it's better to have one big election where all the candidates are available to be voted on. And only approval voting can scale that big. And when you have approval voting combined with a live online system and termlessness, it solves the issue of you not participating in important election decisions because none of the people you approved were in the top. You can just vote on who you approve of from the top candidates when all the votes are in. Yes, it seems scary that there can be millions of candidates to choose from, but this is true democracy, and it is possible only through the internet. If you try to do this through paper ballot, you will essentially have to give each voter a ballot that is thick as a book. To summarize, the President, all the lawmakers known as Congress, the Supreme Judges, all are democratically elected from millions of candidates and must retain the most approval amongst all the competing candidates to stay in power. And since all the votes are open ballot and publicly shown, no one can argue by saying that it is rigged or actually try and rig it. Threats and bribery won't work. If the oligarch tries to bribe the voters, they'll take the money, vote the way the bribe wanted, but change their vote later to what they desire. They can't be threatened because they will just change their vote after getting out of the dangerous situation. If the oligarch tries to bribe the elected officials will immediately lose their power and position when they go against the wishes of the masses, because there is no term and the votes could change at any time, allowing a different candidate of higher approval to take place. But there is one important thing to note. Even if this system of government that is heavily under the power of the masses works very well, there is always the possibility of the oligarch financing the military to create a coup. Be very wary of this, and remember that we must always also democratically choose the generals of the military, the chief of police with stated methods I have listed above. There must be a restriction on how much land, buildings, and capital one individual can privately own, and there also must be a rich person tax. Some smart oligarchs might claim that it is not their own property, but it's the company's property, and that they need the capital to operate. I do agree that these companies that create jobs and wealth in the nation need large capital to function. In that case, how companies operate must be changed. All the shares of the company must be owned by the people that work in that company with even distribution. The CEO of the company must be democratically elected using the methods I mentioned above, meaning that a rich person can start a company, but that company will immediately become its own legal entity with its own culture created through its democratic process. While this could lead to a company becoming its own echo chamber by workers keeping people out who disagree with their little group, but such companies can't have more people, otherwise they'll lose their echo effect, and big companies with a lot of workers will naturally be a fair democratic entity of its own rule. The most important aspect of any society is having an actual democracy and people who are well educated enough on the truth to vote. The internet made it easy for people to learn about world events and study the truth, so I urge people to trust in democracy more. In any country that loses democracy, communist and socialist societies turn into state capitalism when democracy is lost. The state owns every property, no private ownership, the people are starving and homeless, and they can't go against the government because their homes are actually not their property and are state-owned. Whereas capitalist societies turn into oligarchy rule where the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom half of citizens, and it won't matter if there is some democracy. It will be managed and both parties will be financed by the oligarch. The rich plus parties will not do anything substantial to oppose them. So really, it was never about communism versus capitalism. It was always about whether your country is actually democratic or not. Also, we are currently testing out this idea of cyber democracy and its voting system in a Discord server. It's called cyber democracy. Please check it out and contribute to the cause of creating a more fair and truly democratic voting system.